And George Will were telling us it's 8-year-olds with teddy bears, and it's like, no, the dreamers go all the way up to 31 years old.
That's the big misconception people don't have, because you hear X number of children come over the border every month. 31-year-old men, people older than me, qualify as a child under the DREAM Act.
Yeah, dreamers. And that's the key thing for the dreamers, is giving them educational opportunities, quote unquote. So that means that we're not talking about 9 million people. We don't know how many we're talking about. We're creating an entitlement program here. We're opening up the borders to allow everyone from all over the world, not just Central and South America, anyone from anywhere in the world can come into our country, can claim these entitlement benefits, and then we're all going to be on the hook to pay for it.
Right, because like he says, all this stuff is free. Somebody has to pay for this stuff at the end of the day. And when you want to talk about people getting in-state tuition, you know, I'm from Oklahoma. I came here to Texas. Nobody offered me in-state tuition.
That's because you're not an illegal alien. If you're an illegal alien, you can get in-state tuition in any of the 50 states. And in many cases, you're going to get a free ride. Now, you're talking about making it universal, and he says he wants to make it as universal as high school. He wants 2 years of college to be free, quote unquote, and as universal as high school. One of the problems I have with this is that we've already got people in school for too long.
Right.
They become dependent on government. They don't think for themselves. They don't get out and start engaging in the real world, learning real skills, learning real interaction. And of course, they want people to stay inside that government-run cocoon. And so he wants to extend this for another 2 years. That's what that's really about. But let's also understand that you're going to be paying taxes for this. If anybody pays property taxes, they're going to realize that pretty much all of their property taxes go to pay for that universal high school education that's out there. So there isn't anything that's free. And this is just going to extend the burden of that, plus bring in the dreamers from other countries to use these benefits.
And it also feeds into this college bubble. You know, as we've been hinting on, a lot of times you'll get out of college, and even if you do find a job in your field, it may take several years to actually get there, because they want the internships, all these other things. You know, like many years ago, you may have been able to get a decent job with an associate's degree. You cannot do that anymore.
Yes.
So it continues to feed into that.
Let's talk about internet, because we said this is going to be really big. And this is something that we believe that they're going to get passed, because the Republicans want this very badly. And of course, we now have a Republican in the Senate who's now head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Richard Burr has replaced Dianne Feinstein. He has said that he doesn't think anything that the NSA does should ever be made public in a hearing. They should never have any oversight of the CIA or the NSA. So these are people who are above and beyond even the worst stuff that we have seen coming along the pike. Now, here's the areas that he's talking about. He's talking about FCC control of the internet. He's talking about faster broadband. He's talking about privacy, putting restrictions on corporations sharing your data when they're turning it over to the government, and at the same time they're putting out CISPA legislation again to try to grant legal immunity to the corporations who basically turn your information over to the government.
And it's
David,
not just...
I noticed you put LOL next to privacy on your notes.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think that's funny?
Yeah, I think that is amazing, a bit of irony there. And then, of course, he's extended the CFAA, which is going to give us a whole lot of new felonies. And so the internet community is very concerned about this part of the proposal. This is where there's a lot of devils in the detail. Let's talk about first FCC control. Last week, he said that Congress doesn't really need to get involved in this. This is something that he says the FCC already has authority in. And clearly they don't. The FCC has never been involved with the internet, and there's no reason for the FCC to get involved in the internet. The FCC was set up to allocate broadband for broadcast, not broadband. They were set up to allocate broadcast frequencies so that people didn't run over each other. They don't need to do that with the internet. We don't need any internet control. And so what they're saying is, we're going to, and this is where the lies come in. They're saying, we're going to set up the FCC to make sure that the internet is free. Well, the internet has been free.
It's already free out.
Exactly.
Or free and
Make
open.
it freer for them.
Exactly. And one of the ironies that he says here, he says there should be no gatekeepers and then he talks about, and as the FCC considers new rules. Okay, the FCC is going to become the gatekeepers. They're going to make the rules. They're going to control this. And the FCC has already been on both sides of the net neutrality issue.
Debate.
They have switched on both sides. They will do whatever they need to. Right now, the general public wants to have net neutrality. They want to keep things the way that they are. So that's what they're selling the public. Once they get that authority, they can flip just like that, as we've already seen them do.
Gatekeeper. And then cities that have successfully set up their own high-speed internet, their own broadband system, they are now facing against these giants, Google, Time Warner, Comcast, all these mergers, AT&T. They are trying to stop these cities from being able to set up their own municipal networks. And
absolutely.
I mean, that's what it is. It's taking the power away from the states.
Absolutely. So they're going to centralize control. They're going to use the FCC as part of a multi-pronged attack. They're going to come after us with security regulations to protect us from hackers. They're going to come after us with the FCC. They're going to come after us with taxes. They're going to come after us with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And why, you say, would we have internet control as part of a trade agreement? Well, there's a lot of stuff in these so-called trade agreements that have nothing to do with trade, free or otherwise, but they're going to impose us. Real quickly, let's go to faster broadband. And again, I think it's ironic that they want to talk about faster broadband when one of the reasons we're getting things so slow is because we have the NSA basically tapping in.
You try to send a text and it's got to go to the NSA first and then to your friend.
Right, for everybody who doesn't know about the NSA, I've been to a facility in San Antonio. I believe Gucciardi and some of the other guys went to a different facility. I mean, they're all around the United States, and there are these huge buildings where they pretty much sift through your data, your cell phone calls, your internet searches, you know, all your things. They look at your pictures on Facebook and all this stuff, looking for terrorists. And for everybody who says this is some old wives' tale or whatever, you can watch, one of the shows I like to watch is 48 Hours Mystery. It comes on CBS. And it's all these murder cases. But basically somebody commits a crime and then they go and they show you everything they've ever done on social media ever, and they use it against them in a court of law. And I'm not saying you should be doing things you shouldn't be doing, but I'm just saying this stuff is being collected on you.
Right.
Well, and I just want to say these facilities aren't very green either for all you greenies out there. They use a lot of water, a lot of electricity, a lot of resources to store all this data.
Right. That's why Utah is trying to shut off their water.
And that's a very interesting approach to shut down the data collection center, is to talk about how we cannot afford to provide this amount of water in a very dry state like Utah.
And it's not just siphoning off to the NSA, but now it's being siphoned off to the Stingray surveillance system and all these other surveillance streetlights and you know, this Intella streetlights and things like that that are scooping up all of your data and then sending it to third parties, who knows what, and all this smart homes. And
the government has such an insatiable appetite to know everything about us that it needs more broadband so it can spy on us with the Internet of Things, as Joe Biggs talked about. There's, you know, the number of devices that you're going to have in your home, all of them capable of spying on you, all of them feeding into your internet that you're paying for. And if you're paying for it,
why do you need a smart dishwasher or a smart refrigerator that tells you when you're out of milk? You can tell when you're out of milk.
Well, you don't, but the CIA wants you to have one for their own purposes. The next thing, again, the privacy, the head fake about limiting corporations from sharing your data. At the same time, they're talking over and over about the cyber intelligence sharing protection program. You know what? They're only going to protect the corporations. They're going to grant them legal immunity when they share your data with the government, essentially making the case that if you're doing business with a corporation, then they own all the information that they collect about you, whether you know they're collecting that information about you or not. You have agreed to do business with your telephone company or with your ISP or with whoever you've connected to on the internet. So any information that they collect about you is equally theirs as much as it is about you. Now, we don't believe that's true.
Right, well, because when all of this NSA surveillance first came out, a lot of people were, like the Yahoo and Google, and their first instinct was to say, well, we didn't know, we didn't do it, you know, protect us from these pending lawsuits that are going to come. People say you're violating our rights. So now they're protecting those people, and obviously it's going to come out when healthcare.gov really takes off. People who are using healthcare.gov, their private data, their health information, which is historically extremely private data, is now being shared with third parties. And then those third parties can share them with other parties, and who knows how wide the net is cast. But this is confirmed now, and they're basically using it to track people, building these online profiles, which are, of course, vital for advertisers. And, you know, the interview that I had earlier tonight just talked about how advertising is all of this mind control. And so the more data they can have on us, the easier it's going to be for them to control us. It's not just about, oh, well, you know, I like this, so I'm glad that I'm being targeted with this advertising because it's a relevant ad. It's about controlling you, controlling your ideas.
Yes, it's not. They're not just passively lurking there like some kind of a creepy voyeur watching everything that's going on in your life. They're taking this data, they're mining this data, they're looking at how they can manipulate you after they characterize what you're about and determine that you're a person of interest. I mean, if you're somebody that just checks out and all you do is watch sports and listen to music, they're not interested in you. If you're engaged in politics, they're going to figure out where you are in the political spectrum. They're going to target you with information. And you have to understand, this is very much like they've always done with gerrymandering. In terms of going in, they would pick the voters to make sure they got the results that they want. We saw this in North Carolina when, after decades of Democrat control, they went of the local state government, the local state House and Senate. They went from Democrat control to Republican control. There was a sea change there where everybody, Republicans swept everything except Congress. Congress didn't change in that one election because they had gerrymandering in place so precise that they had those incumbents maintain that 2010 election. But 2010 was a year that they had the census and the state legislature got to redraw those boundaries. And then you saw everything change because they picked the voters. Now, what they're doing with social media is they're going to determine, and they've already done it, they're going to determine who you are and where you are on the political spectrum, and then they're going to use that to push their information to you to control you. That's how they're going to pick the voters and manipulate the voters. It isn't going to be something as old-fashioned as gerrymandering. They're going to go directly to you through social media. Let's talk now about these new felonies that are coming out. And I mentioned yesterday on the nightly news this article from Wired magazine, written by one of their contributing editors, talking about how he had been a consultant on the new movie Black Hat from Michael Mann. And he talked about how in awe he was of Michael Mann and Miami Vice. And of course, we know that Miami Vice was used to sell a very different image of the war on drugs that exists in reality, basically glorifying civil asset forfeiture, making it a game, showing that only the really bad guys lost their cigar boats and their Ferraris, and Tubbs and Crockett got to drive around in these things, never showing how it was really being applied to take all the cash that they might come across from some poor landscaper who was doing business in cash, steal all of his money, steal his car, look and see that there's one person in a car, as they're doing today, one person in a car that's got a joint that's visible, and they confiscate the entire car from the other guy, even though that guy's not driving it, it's not his car, they take the entire car. So they've already used Michael Mann to sell the war on drugs. Now they're using Michael Mann essentially to sell the cyber war. And that's what this fellow said. He says, yeah, this is really great. And then I got kind of scared on Tuesday evening when I saw the details of Obama's cyber proposals. And this is what he said. He was very concerned about the fact that they're stepping up this Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. This CFAA is what they came after Aaron Schwartz with. And they were going to try to send him to jail for 35 years. And presumably, according to the official story, he committed suicide because he was so distraught over that. I don't believe that for a moment.
Yeah, so many
that wasn't his personality. Yes, and there was a tweet out from the prosecutor's husband that said that, wait a minute, when everybody pushed back against her and said, you drove him to suicide, trying to get this draconian legislation pushed, trumping up these charges to a 35-year thing. He said, wait a minute, she offered him 3.5-month plea bargain deal, and he turned it down. That's the public Aaron Schwartz that we had seen, the fighter. Right. So I don't believe that he committed suicide. Nevertheless, they're going to up this. They're going to now specifically first-time offenses that don't involve credit cards or more than $5,000 in information. Those crimes will now be felonies instead of misdemeanors. They say also CFAA violations would qualify, and this is very important, for prosecution under the RICO statute, Meaning, for example, if a member of Anonymous is busted in a petty denial of service attack, she might now be held legally accountable for every cybercrime they say Anonymous has committed. So when they start